Today, I'm talking to Avtar Singh, who's the pioneer and founder of Ultra Trail Marathon in Malaysia. He is also a race director and road and trail runner. Today, we're going to be talking about the intricacies of event race management, of course, COVID-19, and what role race management and also participants must play in ensuring a successful race for all. Thank you for being here.
Good day, Greg. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. So let's kick off. So, of course, we're going to talk about COVID-19 first. COVID-19 has taken the world by storm, whether you're organizing exhibitions, whether it's conferences or outdoor physical events, it's affected everybody. As an event organizer, how has it affected your industry and what does the future of race management look like?
Well, what happened on the 18th of March essentially signaled a complete ban on the organizing of any events when the MCO, the Movement Control Order, was introduced, which in turn meant that events had to be cancelled, events had to be postponed to later dates, or even till next year. It's affected the race organizing community, companies that organize running events, pretty badly. These companies continue to operate. They have monthly operating costs with no revenue, no income, unlike other industries that have been allowed to reopen under new directives and new SOPs. As far as organizing events, companies that organize running races, we have no directives. We have no information as to when we can begin organizing events. We have no new SOPs. We are simply in the dark at the moment, and many organizers simply have no idea what the future is at the moment in time because, we are sort of in the middle of 2020 now, in July, and it's very difficult for anybody in any industry, any company owner, anybody that is the owner of a Sdn Bhd or a private limited company, to run a business if you simply do not know the future, especially when the company is not generating any revenue or any income. But operating costs for that company continues to go on in the form of rentals, electricity bills, staff wages, EPF, SOCSO. Some companies have income taxes to pay on a monthly basis, wages for the owner, transportation and fuel costs, accounting and auditing on a monthly basis. These costs do not go away. They are there, but it's something that is lacking. There does not seem to be any communication from the federal government for our industry, unlike many other industries who have been allowed to reopen and have been operating for a month or two. Some have been operating even during the MCO because they were considered essential services. So they've been very lucky. But I think for event organizers, it's been horrible. It's been an absolute disaster, I think, for many. Some maybe not as badly affected or badly hit as others, but I think the industry will see changes in the future. Those changes, I'm not sure what they will be exactly, but you may find that some organizers may not be in the business anymore moving forward, and they may elect to withdraw themselves and to stop functioning. Others may reduce the number of events they organize. We just don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
So when you say wait and see, are you waiting for a government directive, a state directive?
I think COVID-19 has changed the situation in many ways for organizers and runners alike. But I think the most important thing for everybody is to understand what is COVID-19, why it needs to be taken so seriously, because it may not necessarily affect that individual directly, but it may affect somebody they know or somebody close to them who may be at risk. And this is the real danger with COVID-19 in a world where there is no vaccine for this virus. And that in turn will affect how events are organized, SOPs, the new SOPs that will be introduced for the benefit of everybody, changes that will come about as a result of COVID-19, as far as how water stations will operate, how water is distributed and fruit is distributed, food is distributed. What will happen at finish lines and even start lines? Do we keep everybody together en masse, or do we separate everybody into small groups? Do we have a general start for everybody, where everybody starts at the start line together, or do we do staggered starts? Many questions need to be, there are many questions to be answered, many things to be considered, but a lot of it will depend on the SOPs or the standard operating procedures that we hope the government will release and provide to us to help guide us along this path. If we were to look at what is going on in Europe as far as events are concerned, we can use some of their policies and SOPs as a guideline. I think there's nothing wrong in that. But again, we need to wait, I think, and that's the unfortunate thing. We're coming to 4 months since the MCO was introduced and events were cancelled, and we still don't know what the situation will be, and that's not good. I think the only sensible manner that I think social distancing can be implemented in running races is to do staggered starts in groups of maybe, again, depending on the size of the event, but potentially groups of 10. But even then, that wouldn't make any sense, especially for an event that has 500 to 1,000 people in the event. That would not work. So we're looking at potentially groups of maybe 50 at a time, but maybe in rows of 10, with a 2 meter spacing in between each row. So 5 rows, 50 people at a time, and then maybe allowing a 2-minute or 3-minute interval between the starts per group. So I mean, that is something that can be considered, and at the finish line, obviously same thing. Runners come in, temperatures are checked, basic hygiene standards are implemented, timing chips are scanned, their finish time is recorded. They collect their prizes, and everybody goes and gets washed up immediately after finishing and change of clothing before they have a meal, or they bought transports to go home. And even just question mark also is on transportation as well. How many people are allowed in a transportation from a finish line venue back to the city for events that are organized outside of a city area? Many things to be considered. We still don't have answers for many questions, but we are where we are at the moment, and we need directives, we need guidelines from the government in this regard.
So, I mean, you've been doing this for many years now, and you've planned both road and trail events.
Yes.
But of course, road and trail events are completely different in the way you approach it, the way you manage it as well, your risk assessment aspect to this as well. But what are the core fundamental differences when you're an organizer? I mean, for me, I would think to myself, of course, cars and traffic when you're dealing with road events, and of course, fallen trees and hazards on trail events. I mean, what are you looking at in terms of preparation and planning?
Well, Greg, it really comes down to the mitigation of risk for events. When you do an assessment, you plan for a race, you really are sort of trying to mitigate the risk, first of all, to the runners who are participating on that particular route. The need for risk assessments to be carried out, and for the risk assessments to tell you what the risks are and dangers are, not only to the runners but also the organizing team as well. Now, the risk assessments, the assessments carried out are slightly different between a road race and a trail race. Now, what I do, and I have been doing for about 20 years when I organize races and design race courses, is I look at the race course, I study it, I do the assessments, I conduct an evaluation, And then I look at how I can mitigate the risks. So, if, for example, the Beaufort Ultra Marathon, which I've been organizing since 2011 or 2012. So on this particular race course, we have a 30-kilometer section on a highway, a busy highway during the daytime. So we start at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. start on purpose. It allows the runners to have at least 3.5 to 4 hours of cool weather on the route. It's also the best time to run because of the low number of vehicles plying that particular highway between Beaufort and Kuala Penyu and Menumbuk. And we know that that road becomes incredibly busy after a certain period of time. And by that time, we have set cutoff times where runners need to be off that particular section of the route and on to roads that are not as busy, quieter roads, village roads, and onto other areas of the race course, such as the beach. There's a beach route as well. So the risks have been mitigated. We lower the risks. We introduce the use of reflective vests, headlamps, and rear-facing blinker lights because we also have an obligation, not only as the organizers, but also the runners have an obligation to drivers of vehicles to give them some warning that there are runners on the road. So this works both ways. Runners allow vehicle drivers to then take corrective action if necessary to avoid these runners and to drive safely past these runners as well. So these protocols help to mitigate and reduce the risks on the road in the dark. We restrict the number of runners on busy roads because we know the volume of vehicles on roads will increase the risks to runners. So common sense and sensible actions are needed by both runners on the road, vehicle drivers as well. Now for trails, this is a little bit different. I think Mother Nature sort of dictates to us what kind of race we will have on the day of the event. So the planning is slightly different. We need to study the race course. We need to study evacuation points. We need to study rivers and understand the volume of water that comes down a river during a heavy downpour and whether that river is passable or not, or whether it's a danger to runners who need to pass these rivers. We study race routes. We look for danger spots where there are potential landslides. And we also need to then plan ahead for these evacuation points that I talked about, where stretcher teams, if they need to actually carry somebody out, have pre-planned evacuation points where we have medical teams and vehicles that can get to those evacuation points, can attend to a casualty, and then if safely evacuate them to the nearest hospital. We have sweepers, we have scouts, we have pathfinders that mark the routes. So many people involved in the planning process, many things involved in the planning of both road and trail races. Trail races tend to be a bit more complicated and need a lot more dedicated time and pre-planning. And much of this is down to experience, bringing experience to the table and having a sound picture of the entire race course and being able to highlight and pinpoint the danger areas of that particular route for that particular event.
Wow. So, I mean, you just led me onto a fantastic segue, talking about design and the conceptualization of planning a race as well. So, I mean, it sounds like it's heavily evolved over the years, like you were saying, from 2004 to where we are today. But there must be a lot of different variables which a race director like yourself must consider. You know, like you mentioned, you know, we're talking difficulty levels, we're talking making sure that there's hydration stations as well. Yep. I mean, how do you put all this together in your plan?
I think it's down to experience, personal experience from having competed in running races, competitive races for so long, since I was 12, starting in college as a cross-country runner, as a track and field runner, having excellent coaching and leadership by these coaches and teachers, having experience competing in the Pacific Northwest in the United States, running in small races in Western Australia, in Singapore, and then of course organizing races for about 20 years now in Malaysia, in Borneo. The understanding of the race course, the level of difficulty of that race course and the type of runners that particular race course is designed for. The temperatures on the race course, on race day, what they may be. On some days you have some race courses that are incredibly exposed to the hot sun, where temperatures can surpass 36, 37 degrees Celsius, and the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke, or where temperatures may drop to 10 or 12 degrees Celsius on a really bad day, which brings on the onset of and risk of hypothermia. So you need to be aware of all these risks along the race course, and I ensure that I have the right assets available to me so that I'm able to manage the race course, the right skill set of people who can assist me to manage the crowd and also manage the runners on the race course. And of course, the most important thing I always think is the philosophy of the race director. What is his or her philosophy when organizing a race? What kind of race are they organizing for the benefit of the community? But I go back to this idea of having a team to work with who understand what is expected of them on the day of the event. Knowing how I think, knowing how I would handle situations that they may be faced with, and how they then react to situations and problems. Having good lines of communication between myself and them on the ground, the assets on the ground, and having a level of trust. I think the trust is essential. This bond is built over time, this trust is built over time, the experience is gained and the knowledge is shared. I'm very, very fortunate. I've had a really good team behind me to ensure that I was able to manage these races, so that I was able to focus on the actual race and ensure the safety of the runners from start to finish, and to react to emergencies when there was a need to evacuate runners off the race course, be it due to hypothermia or heat exhaustion, even bee stings, arm fractures, leg fractures. We've had a number of different cases over the years, and we've had to react to these emergencies with a cool, level-headed approach to things, and having the right assets in place to be able to react to these emergencies. And this is also down to a little bit of luck from time to time. But for the most part, it really is dependent on the team making it possible for me to do what I do successfully.
I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put my hand in the air and say that I've actually participated in a couple of, they weren't ultra marathon races, but a couple of light races as well. I registered myself, pretty much forgot about it, knew it was coming up at the weekend, read the email that you probably sent me the night before, and realized I wasn't ready. I'm sure I'm not the first.
It happens. Yeah.
That it does.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Now, of course, the other key aspect for this as well is, with the advent of technology as well, we have a lot more people who are on the internet. There's a lot of, pro conversation as well, but there's also a lot of negative aspects to it. And a lot of different industries have experienced the negative side to the internet. And, we've all heard of the word trolling before as well. In your industry, what kind of experiences have you had with trolling? And what was the impact of this?
So these small group of runners, they've morphed into blaming the entire organization sometimes over small issues. And then they spread inaccurate information within the community. And this is not good. But it's these sorts of people that actually are not contributing to the sport. They know who they are. And all they're doing is merely upsetting people in the long term. These are trolls. So you'll find these trolls on social media, on WhatsApp. They'll have their own WhatsApp group, and they'll pass misinformation within the WhatsApp group. They'll give a completely different account of what has transpired or what has happened. They will come on social media to an event Facebook page, and they will just cause problems. And they'll bring along a group of friends intent on causing problems. And none of these guys are serious runners. They're not elite runners. They're not good runners. They're passing on really bad ideas and who then take on these bad habits. Now, this is the danger of what these trolls do.
Okay, so this is my last question, and I think it's a really important one to ask as well. If we put COVID-19 aside for a minute, and we jump 10 years into the future as well, what will your industry look like? And will you be doing it the same way now? How will it be different? What do you foresee? Look into your crystal ball for me, if you wouldn't mind.
I think the biggest problem that we face in the future is the introduction of so many new rules, and the organization of both trail running and road running races becoming too technical, too complicated, that it doesn't make it viable or worth the effort to even organize a race. The one big problem, I think sometimes this gets forgotten, is that the majority of races around the world, Malaysia included, are not organized for elite runners. They are organized for the everyday runner. They're organized for the social runner. They're organized for the amateur runner, not for elite runners, national runners, state runners, international runners, sponsored runners. 90% of races are organized for everyday people. And once you start making these races too technical, these races become too complicated. There are too many rules, too many regulations to abide by, and too many different authorities that you need to get permission from. So it drives up the cost of organizing these races. It becomes a problem. What you have is you'll have less races being organized, which isn't very good for the community in the long term, because there are less events being organized. And good race directors, and I always put race directors into different categories. They are race directors, they organize races, running races, because they love the sport. They grew up with the sport. They know what they're doing, versus companies that are organizing events purely for financial gain. There are two different brackets here, two different categories. And what you find, the good guys who organize races may just walk away from it. And then you find only corporations, large companies who are financially sound organizing races, but they don't really cater for the everyday runner. So this is one consideration, one possibility, and I see things going in that direction, unfortunately. Things will get a little bit more complicated in time. Once international running federations get involved with the sport of trail running, in particular in Asia, it will happen sooner rather than later. We don't know what will happen specifically, but we hope they don't make it too difficult. They don't make it too complicated, as it is. It's not easy to organize trail races or road races in Malaysia, unlike before. But I think as long as the rules and regulations are sensible and we are able to abide by these rules and regulations, I don't think there's a problem. But that's the one danger that worries me in the future.
Well, let's hope your industry, the race industry, doesn't go that way, and people, still enjoy themselves and go there to participate, have fun, but also win and be competitive.